When 15-year-old Kiana stepped between the bullies and the trembling boy, she had no idea she was about to change the life of one of America's most powerful men, and her own forever. Welcome back, amazing souls. Hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story will absolutely wreck you emotionally, and you won't want to miss it. Tonight, when a scholarship student stepped between bullies and a billionaire's autistic son, she had no idea she was about to change two families forever. Let's begin. The November rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office, each drop a percussion note in the symphony of Richard Blackstone's solitude. He stood motionless, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a circuit board of lights, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. At 42, he commanded an empire worth $12 billion, yet the view from the top had never felt more hollow. His phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, the fourth call from Riverside Academy in an hour. Richard's jaw tightened. Another incident with Tyler. His 15-year-old son's autism made him a target in ways that Richard's money couldn't shield him from, no matter how exclusive the school, how generous the donations. "Sir," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The school is calling again." Richard closed his eyes. "Tell them I'm in a meeting." The lie tasted bitter. He wasn't in a meeting. He was drowning in the space between loving his son and not knowing how to help him navigate a world that saw difference as weakness. 6 miles across the city, in the cramped kitchen of a third-floor apartment, 15-year-old Kiana Washington stirred a pot of ramen with mechanical precision. The scholarship that got her into Riverside Academy felt like a daily reminder that she didn't belong among the designer backpacks and casual mentions of European vacations. But the education was her ticket out, for her and her younger brother David, who sat at their tiny table struggling with homework under the flickering fluorescent light. "Kiana, I can't figure out this math," David complained, his 8-year-old voice heavy with frustration. She glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m. If she helped him now, she'd miss her bus and have to take 3 different city buses to school, making her late for first period. Again. But the way David's shoulders slumped, the same way Tyler Blackstone's did when kids whispered about him in the hallways, she couldn't walk away. "Bring it here," she said softly, turning off the heat under the ramen. As she guided David through long division, Kiana thought about Tyler, the quiet boy who sat alone at lunch, methodically arranging his food into perfect squares. She'd watched him for months, noticed how he flinched when classmates spoke too loudly, how he rocked slightly when overwhelmed. She recognized the signs. David had shown similar behaviors when he was younger, before the family support sessions at the community center helped them understand him better. Tyler didn't have anyone advocating for him the way she advocated for David. His father, according to school gossip, was some billionaire who was too busy to attend parent conferences. What would you do if you saw someone who needed help, but everyone else looked the other way? She wondered if her viewers would understand the weight of that choice. 20 minutes later, David beamed at his completed homework, and Kiana grabbed her worn backpack, knowing she'd be taking the long route to school. At Riverside Academy, Richard's Bentley pulled up to the circular drive just as the morning bell rang. Through the tinted windows, he watched students flood toward the entrance, confident, laughing, belonging to a world his son struggled to enter. Tyler sat in the passenger seat, his noise-canceling headphones secure over his ears, his fingers tracing patterns on his tablet screen. This was their morning ritual. Richard would drive him to school, and Tyler would sit in the car for exactly 7 minutes after the bell, organizing his thoughts before facing the day. "Ready, buddy?" Richard asked, knowing Tyler couldn't hear him but hoping the familiar routine brought comfort. Tyler looked up, his gray eyes so much like his late mother's meeting his father's briefly before nodding. "Have a good day. I love you." Tyler's response was barely a whisper, "Love you too, Dad." As Richard watched his son walk toward the building, shoulders hunched against more than just the November wind, a familiar ache settled in his chest. All the money in the world couldn't buy Tyler the one thing he needed most, acceptance. Kiana burst through the school's front doors just as Mrs. Henderson began taking attendance in first period. She slipped into her seat, breathless, and caught sight of Tyler 2 rows ahead. He was already deep into his morning routine, arranging his pencils by length, checking his schedule 3 times, preparing for a day in a world that often felt too loud, too fast, too unpredictable. During lunch, while other students clustered in their social hierarchies, Kiana found herself watching Tyler again. He sat at his usual table by the window, carefully eating his sandwich in perfect squares, oblivious to the whispers and stares. That's when she saw them approaching, Derek Morrison and his crew, the kind of boys who mistook cruelty for confidence. "Hey, robot boy." Derek's voice cut through the cafeteria chatter. Tyler looked up, confusion flickering across his features. Kiana's hands stilled on her lunch tray. Every instinct told her to look away, to stay invisible, to not make herself a target. But as Derek reached for Tyler's carefully arranged lunch, something inside her snapped. The choice she made in that moment would echo far beyond the walls of Riverside Academy, setting in motion events that would transform 2 families in ways neither could imagine. What drives someone to step up for a stranger when everyone else stays silent? Share your thoughts below. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between safety and doing what's right? The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath as Derek Morrison's fingers hovered over Tyler's perfectly arranged lunch. Tyler's body had gone rigid, his eyes darting between his disturbed meal and the circle of faces around him. The small tremor in his hands, barely visible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, told Kiana everything she needed to know. "Please don't," Tyler whispered, his voice so quiet it was almost lost in the ambient noise of the cafeteria. Derek's grin widened. "Don't what, freak? I'm just wondering why you eat like a robot. Does your daddy's money come with an instruction manual?" The other boys laughed, and Kiana felt something hot and familiar rise in her chest. The same feeling she got when kids made fun of David's quirks, when teachers looked at her scholarship jacket with barely concealed pity, when the world decided that being different meant being less than. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. Every head at nearby tables turned toward her, conversations dying mid-sentence. "Back off." Her voice cut through the cafeteria with quiet authority. Derek spun around, his eyebrows raised in mock surprise. Well, scholarship girl wants to play hero." His eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "This doesn't concern you, charity case." The insult landed exactly where Derek intended, but Kiana didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Instead, she took a step closer, positioning herself between Derek and Tyler's table. "It concerns me when 4 guys think they're tough picking on someone who's eating lunch alone." Derek's face darkened. "You don't know who you're messing with. My father owns half this city. And my father taught me that character isn't measured by your bank account." Kiana's voice remained steady though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Walk away, Derek." Behind her, she could hear Tyler's breathing. Quick, shallow, the sound of someone trying not to panic. She didn't turn around, didn't break eye contact with Derek, but she spoke softly over her shoulder. "Tyler, it's okay. Just keep breathing like we practiced in group sessions. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Tyler's breathing began to slow, following her gentle guidance. The technique she'd learned helping David through his anxiety was universal, a bridge between their different worlds. Derek's friends began to shuffle uncomfortably. What had started as casual cruelty was becoming something else, something that made them complicit in a way they hadn't signed up for. The audience that had gathered to watch Tyler's humiliation was now watching Derek face down a girl half his size who refused to back down. "You think you're protecting him?" Derek's voice rose, drawing more attention. "You think Daddy Billionaire is going to thank you? People like us don't matter to people like them. You're just another." "Another what?" Kiana stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Say it, Derek. Say what you really think." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even the lunch staff had stopped their clattering to watch. Derek's face flushed red as he realized he'd painted himself into a corner. Anything he said now would reveal exactly what kind of person he was in front of everyone. Just stay out of it," he muttered, his bravado crumbling. "No." Kiana's voice was gentle but immovable. "I won't stay out of it when someone needs help. And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. But you're done here. For a moment, Derek looked like he might push back, might escalate. But something in Kiana's eyes, not fear, not anger, but a quiet certainty, made him think twice. He glanced around at the watching faces, at his friends who were already taking small steps backward, at Tyler, who was now watching the exchange with wide, fascinated eyes. Whatever, Derek mumbled, turning away. He's not worth it anyway. As Derek and his crew slunk away, the normal sounds of the cafeteria gradually resumed. Conversations picking up, chairs scraping, the distant clatter of trays. But Tyler remained frozen, staring at Kiana with an expression she couldn't quite read. She turned to face him fully for the first time, and what she saw made her chest tighten. Not gratitude, exactly. Not relief. Something deeper, recognition. The look of someone who had spent so long feeling invisible that being seen, truly seen, felt revolutionary. "Are you okay?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him. Tyler nodded slowly, then shook his head, then nodded again. No one has ever. His words trailed off, but his meaning hung in the space between them. Kiana reached across the table, slowly, telegraphing her movement so as not to startle him, and gently rearranged his lunch back into the precise pattern Derek had disrupted. Tyler watched her hands with intense focus, his breathing finally returning to normal. "My little brother arranges his food too," she said quietly. "Different patterns, but same reason, makes the world feel more manageable, right?" Tyler's eyes snapped to hers, wide with surprise, not because she understood, but because she said it without pity, without the careful tiptoeing that most people used around his differences. "Yes," he whispered. "Exactly like that." In the principal's office on the second floor, Mrs. Chen was reviewing security footage from the cafeteria cameras when she paused, rewound, and watched the scene again. Then she reached for her phone and dialed a number she'd called 4 times that morning. "Mr. Blackstone, I think you need to see this. Have you ever witnessed a moment that changed everything? Tell us about a time when someone's courage inspired you to see the world differently. If you believe courage like Kiana's deserves recognition, show some love with a like. And if you want more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, hit that subscribe button." Richard Blackstone's hands trembled as he set down his phone. Mrs. Chen's words echoed in his mind. "A student stood up for Tyler today. I think you should come in and see the footage." He stared at the contract spread across his desk, a merger that would add another billion to his net worth. But the numbers blurred together. In 15 years of fatherhood, no one had ever volunteered to protect his son. Teachers intervened when required. Administrators managed situations when forced. But this was different. His first instinct was suspicion. What did this girl want? In his experience, kindness always came with a price tag, especially when it involved his family. He'd learned that lesson the hard way after his wife Elena's death, when supposed friends circled like vultures, offering comfort with one hand while calculating opportunity with the other. Richard buzzed his assistant. "Cancel my 3 p.m. with the Singapore investors. I need to make a trip." "Sir, that meeting took months to arrange." "Cancel it." But even as he grabbed his keys, doubt gnawed at him. What if this was orchestrated? What if someone had discovered Tyler's vulnerability and was using it as leverage? The thought of his son being manipulated, used as a pawn in someone else's game, made his jaw clench. He'd built walls around Tyler for good reason. The world was full of people who saw difference as weakness, who would exploit a trusting nature for their own gain. This girl, whoever she was, had crossed those carefully constructed boundaries. As his car pulled away from Blackstone Industries, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, and change in his experience usually meant loss. Kiana sat in the empty school library, her chemistry homework forgotten on the table before her. The afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows that seemed to match her mood. What had she done? The confrontation with Derek replayed in her mind on an endless loop. She'd acted on instinct, the same protective impulse that kicked in whenever David was threatened. But Tyler Blackstone wasn't her little brother. He was the son of a man whose net worth could probably buy her entire neighborhood. And now what? The rational part of her brain catalogued all the ways this could go wrong. Derek's family had connections. What if they pushed back? What if they found a way to challenge her scholarship? Her mom worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. They couldn't afford legal troubles or school politics. But it was more than fear of consequences that had her stomach twisted in knots. It was the look in Tyler's eyes when she'd sat down at his table. Not just gratitude, recognition. Like he'd been drowning and suddenly found someone who understood the water. She thought about David, about all the times she'd wished someone would stand up for him when she wasn't there, about the isolation that came with being different, with not fitting neatly into the world's expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mum, working late tonight. Make sure David does his reading. Right. The real world was waiting. Bills to pay, homework to finish, a little brother who needed dinner. Whatever moment she'd shared with Tyler in the cafeteria, that was over. He'd go back to his penthouse life, and she'd go back to hers. That's how these things worked. She packed up her books with sharp, efficient movements, trying to convince herself that the hollow feeling in her chest was relief, not disappointment. She'd done the right thing. That had to be enough. As she pushed through the library doors, she nearly collided with Tyler himself. He stood in the hallway like he'd been waiting, his backpack clutched against his chest, those gray eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Kiana. Her name came out in a rush. I wanted to. Are you okay? The question caught her off guard. After everything that had happened, he was asking if she was okay. I'm fine, she said automatically. Then, seeing his expression, she softened. Are you okay? That whole thing with Derek. I'm used to it. His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was something underneath, a resignation that made her heart ache. People like Derek, they always find someone like me. Someone like you. Tyler's laugh was sharp, bitter, weird, different. Easy target. He looked down at his shoes. My dad pays a lot of money for me to go here, but money doesn't buy belonging. Kiana studied his face, seeing past the expensive haircut and designer clothes to the loneliness underneath. It was a loneliness she recognized, even if their circumstances were different. Tyler, you don't have to pretend, he said quickly. I know how this works. You helped me because you're a good person, and now you're wondering how to get away without seeming cruel. His words hit like a physical blow. Is that what she was doing? Looking for an escape route? That's not. My dad will want to thank you, Tyler continued, his words tumbling over each other. He'll probably offer your family money, or try to do something grand and public. He thinks everything can be fixed with enough zeros on a check. Tyler's hands fluttered anxiously. But I wanted to tell you first, before he makes it weird, that what you did, no one's ever done that for me before. The vulnerability in his voice, the assumption that she would reject him, that kindness was somehow transactional, it broke something open in Kiana's chest. Tyler, stop. He fell silent, bracing for rejection. I didn't help you because I wanted something from your dad. I helped you because... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound patronizing or false. Because everyone deserves to eat lunch in peace. Because Derek was being a jerk. Because it was the right thing to do. Tyler stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. I have to go, she said gently. But Tyler, next time someone bothers you, you don't have to handle it alone. As she walked away, she heard his quiet, thank you, follow her down the hall. Neither of them noticed the black sedan parked outside the school, or the man watching through tinted windows as his son had his first real conversation with the girl who'd changed everything. The knock on the Washington family's apartment door came at 7:17 p.m., just as Kiana was helping David with his spelling words. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her mom wouldn't be home from her second job until after 10, and their neighbors kept to themselves. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the November wind. Behind him stood Tyler, looking smaller somehow in the narrow hallway of their building. Kiana's stomach dropped. She recognized the man from business magazines her economics teacher sometimes brought to class, Richard Blackstone, in her hallway, outside her door. David, go to your room, she whispered. But we're not done with now, please. David, sensing the tension in her voice, gathered his homework and disappeared down the short hallway. Kiana took a deep breath and opened the door, leaving the security chain attached. Mr. Blackstone. She tried to keep her voice steady. Tyler. Miss Washington. Richard's voice was deep, controlled. I apologize for showing up unannounced. May we come in? I believe we need to talk. Every instinct screamed at her to say no. This was her world, cramped, modest, nothing like the gleaming offices and penthouses where men like Richard Blackstone belonged. But Tyler stood slightly behind his father, his eyes apologetic and pleading. She unlatched the chain. The apartment seemed to shrink as the two Blackstones entered. Richard's presence filled the small living room, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the second-hand furniture, and David's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Tyler, meanwhile, stood carefully in the center of the room, his eyes taking in every detail with the intense focus she'd come to recognize. Please, sit, Kiana said, gesturing to the worn couch. Richard remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like he was addressing a board meeting. I saw the security footage from your school today. Of course he had. Men like Richard Blackstone always had access, always knew more than everyone else in the room. Tyler told me what happened, she said carefully. I hope he's okay. He's fine, thanks to you. Richard's eyes searched her face. What I want to know is why. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kiana felt the weight of his scrutiny, the assumption that there had to be an angle, a motive beyond simple human decency. Because it was the right thing to do. Richard's laugh was short, cynical. In my experience, people don't risk themselves for strangers without expecting something in return. Dad. Tyler's voice was quiet but firm. Don't. Don't what, Tyler? Don't be realistic. Don't protect us from people who see opportunity in our situation. Kiana felt heat rise in her cheeks. Is that what you think this is? Some kind of con? I think, Richard said, his voice cooling, that you're a very brave young woman who may not realize the complications that come with getting involved in my son's life. Tyler moved between them, his usually uncertain demeanor replaced by something Kiana had never seen before, determination. She didn't get involved in your life, Dad. She got involved in mine. His voice shook slightly, but he held his ground. And for once, someone did something for me without calculating the cost or worrying about what you'd think. Richard's composure cracked, just slightly. No. Tyler turned to face his father fully. You asked her why she helped me. It's because she saw me, not your son, not a problem to be managed, not a liability to be protected. She saw me. The silence that followed was thick with years of unspoken hurt. Kiana watched father and son stare at each other, seeing the love between them but also the walls they'd built, walls that protected but also isolated. I should go, she said quietly. No, Tyler said immediately. Please, stay. Richard ran a hand through his silver hair, his corporate facade crumbling. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, more human. I've spent 15 years trying to shield him from people who would hurt him. Sometimes I forget that not everyone has ulterior motives. He sank into the couch, suddenly looking older, more tired. After his mother died, it was just us. And the world can be cruel to people like Tyler. I thought money could protect him, could buy him acceptance. But you can't purchase kindness. Tyler sat beside his father, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Kiana didn't know who I was when she helped me. She didn't know about the money or the company or any of it. How could she not know? Richard looked genuinely confused. Because Kiana said softly, I saw a kid who needed help. That's all. Richard studied her for a long moment, and she saw the exact moment his suspicion transformed into something else, recognition. Like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Your mother, he said eventually. Where is she? Working. She has 2 jobs. Kiana lifted her chin slightly, ready for judgment. Instead, Richard nodded. And you take care of your brother. We take care of each other. Dad, Tyler said quietly. I asked if we could come here because I wanted to thank her properly. And because, he glanced at Kiana, then back at his father. Because I've never had a friend before. The word hung in the air like a bridge between their worlds. Friend. Simple, complicated, terrifying, wonderful. Richard was quiet for a long time, his business mind clearly working through implications, possibilities, risks. Finally, he looked at Kiana with something that might have been hope. Tyler starts homeschooling next week, he said. I was going to hire tutors, keep him isolated where I thought he'd be safe. But maybe, he paused, studying his son's face. Maybe isolation isn't protection. Maybe it's just another kind of prison. Thunder rumbled outside, and the first drops of rain began to streak the apartment windows. None of them moved to leave. What does true protection look like? Is it shielding someone from all difficulty, or giving them the tools to face the world with support? Share your thoughts below. The rain had turned into a steady downpour, drumming against the apartment windows like restless fingers. Richard found himself trapped not just by the weather, but by the strange comfort of the Washington family's small living room. Tyler sat cross-legged on the floor, helping David with a puzzle, their heads bent together in easy concentration. It was the most relaxed Richard had seen his son in months. I should call you a cab, Kiana said, glancing toward the window where water cascaded down in sheets. It's fine, Richard replied, though he couldn't remember the last time he'd spent an evening anywhere but his penthouse or office. Tyler seems happy. They watched as Tyler patiently showed David how to sort puzzle pieces by color, his usual nervous energy replaced by gentle focus. David giggled at something Tyler whispered, and Tyler's whole face lit up in response. He's good with kids, Kiana observed. He doesn't get much practice. The words slipped out before Richard could stop them. I've kept his world very small, very controlled. Kiana settled into the chair across from him, her expression thoughtful. That must be exhausting. For both of you. You have no idea. Richard's laugh was hollow. Do you know what it's like to watch your child struggle to connect with the world and know that your protection might be part of the problem? Before Kiana could answer, Tyler looked up from the puzzle. Dad, can I show Kiana Mom's picture? Richard's breath caught. Tyler rarely spoke about Elena, especially not to strangers. Tyler, you don't have to. I want to. Tyler stood, pulling out his phone with careful deliberation. He crossed to Kiana and sat beside her, holding the screen where she could see. The photo showed a woman with warm brown eyes and Tyler's gentle smile, her arms wrapped around a much younger version of Tyler. They were both laughing, covered in what looked like flour. She was teaching me to make cookies, Tyler said softly. She said the mess was the best part because it meant we were actually living, not just existing. Kiana's chest tightened at the pure love in his voice. She looks wonderful. She was. Tyler's thumb traced the edge of the phone screen. She died when I was 7. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Tyler, Richard's voice cracked. It's okay, Dad. I want to tell her. Tyler looked at Kiana with those steady gray eyes. After Mom died, everything changed. Dad became careful. Really careful. He hired bodyguards and drivers and made sure I never went anywhere that wasn't completely safe. Richard stood abruptly, moving to the window. I couldn't lose him too. But the safest places, Tyler continued quietly, were also the loneliest places. Private tutors instead of school. Security instead of friends. Everything scheduled and monitored, and he searched for the word, sanitized. Kiana looked between father and son, beginning to understand the prison they'd built together out of love and fear. I begged him to let me try regular school, Tyler said. Riverside Academy was supposed to be the compromise, elite enough to be safe, but still real enough for me to maybe find something. And did you? Kiana asked gently. Find something? Tyler's smile was small but genuine. I found you. From the window, Richard's shoulders shook once, briefly. My mom says grief makes people do crazy things, Kiana said softly. Both generous things and terrible things, because the pain makes everything feel too big to handle. Your mother sounds wise. Richard turned back toward them, his composed mask slipping. What else does she say? That healing happens in community, that we're not meant to carry everything alone. Kiana glanced at David, who had moved on to building with blocks while Tyler watched with fascination. When my dad left, she could have closed us off from the world, could have decided people weren't trustworthy. But she didn't? She did at first. We barely left the apartment for months. But then David started showing signs of anxiety, and I was becoming... She paused, searching for the right words. Angry at everything. Mom realized that protecting us from potential hurt was also protecting us from potential joy. Richard sank back onto the couch, the weight of 7 years settling on his shoulders. I hired investigators to research every child in Tyler's classes, every teacher, every parent. I know more about his classmates' families than they know about each other. Tyler looked up sharply. You what? I know that Derek Morrison's father has gambling debts, and his mother has been in rehab twice. I know that Sarah Chen's parents are getting divorced, and that Michael Torres's family is in witness protection. Richard's voice was flat, matter of fact. I know everything about everyone who might come into contact with you. The silence that followed was deafening. Did you investigate me? Kiana asked, though she already knew the answer. Of course. Richard couldn't meet her eyes. Single mother, 2 jobs, scholarship student, no father in the picture. Government assistance for food and housing. Tyler stood slowly, his face pale. Dad, how could you? I know that your mother, Linda Washington, works at Morrison General Hospital as a night cleaner and at the Sunrise Diner on weekends. I know that your father hasn't paid child support in 3 years, and that you take David to the community center for free after-school care. Richard's voice grew quieter with each revelation. I know that you tutor other kids for $5 an hour, and that you've never missed a day of school despite taking 3 buses to get there. Kiana felt exposed, dissected. Every private struggle laid bare for this stranger's examination. And what I know, Richard continued, his voice breaking, is that despite having every reason to be bitter about unfairness, you still chose to protect my son. You saw a kid in trouble and helped him, knowing it could cost you. That's not something that shows up in background checks. Tyler was staring at his father like he'd never seen him before. You've been spying on everyone in my life. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. Tyler's voice rose, years of quiet frustration finally breaking free. How am I supposed to trust anyone when you don't trust anyone? The apartment fell silent except for the rain and David's quiet humming as he built his block tower, oblivious to the emotional earthquake happening around him. Richard looked at his son, then at Kiana, then at the modest apartment that somehow felt more like home than his penthouse ever had. You're right, he whispered. Both of you. I've been so afraid of losing Tyler that I forgot he was already disappearing. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, broken only by David's soft humming and the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. Tyler stood frozen in the center of the room, his world tilted off its axis by his father's revelations. Kiana felt raw, exposed, every private struggle catalogued in some billionaire's file. Then David looked up from his blocks, his 8-year-old intuition cutting through the adult tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Are you sad? He asked Tyler, his voice matter-of-fact but kind. Tyler blinked, focusing on the little boy. Yes, a little. When I'm sad, Kiana makes hot chocolate. It doesn't fix everything, but it makes the sad feel warmer. David considered this seriously. Do you want some? The simple offer, innocent, uncomplicated by background checks or ulterior motives, seemed to unlock something in Tyler. His rigid posture softened. I'd like that very much. Kiana rose without thinking, muscle memory taking over. In the tiny kitchen, she pulled out the battered saucepan and the generic cocoa powder, acutely aware of Richard watching her movements. Everything here was second-hand, practical, a far cry from whatever gourmet kitchen Tyler was used to. Can I help? Tyler appeared at her elbow, his voice tentative. Sure. Can you reach the mugs? Top shelf. As Tyler stretched for the mismatched collection of cups, a chipped ceramic mug from a long-ago vacation, A promotional cup from her mom's diner, 2 plain white ones from the dollar store. Kiana realized something had shifted. The boy reaching for mugs wasn't the billionaire's son from the background check. He was just Tyler, wanting to help make hot chocolate. "I used to make this with my mum," Tyler said quietly, watching Kiana measure cocoa powder. She called it healing chocolate because she said regular hot chocolate was just a drink, but healing chocolate was made with intention. What kind of intention? David had wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the promise of cocoa. To make someone feel better, to show you care. Tyler glanced at Richard, who still sat motionless on the couch. She said the secret ingredient was paying attention to the person you're making it for. Kiana felt a lump form in her throat. "Your mum sounds like she was very wise." "She was?" Tyler's voice was soft but steady. "She would have liked you." The simple statement, delivered without fanfare or calculation, hit Kiana squarely in the chest. Not because Tyler was Richard Blackstone's son, not because of money or status, but because she could see the truth in his grey eyes, eyes that saw her clearly, without filters or files or preconceptions. "Here," she said, handing him the wooden spoon. "You stir. The secret is to go slow, so it doesn't clump." Their hands brushed as he took the spoon, and Tyler didn't flinch away. For someone who usually avoided unexpected touch, the ease of the moment felt revolutionary. "Dad," Tyler called over his shoulder. "Do you want some?" Richard looked up, seeming to return from wherever his thoughts had taken him. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," David announced from his perch on a kitchen stool. "You're just wet and sad. Hot chocolate is for wet and sad people." Despite everything, Richard smiled. The first genuine smile Kiana had seen from him. "When you put it that way, I suppose I am both wet and sad." As they settled around the small table with their steaming mugs, the apartment felt different. Not smaller because of Richard's presence, but somehow expanded by the possibility of connection across impossible divides. "I owe you both an apology," Richard said, wrapping his hands around his mug like it was an anchor. "Tyler, I've been so afraid of losing you that I forgot to let you live. And Kiana," he met her eyes, "I'm sorry for invading your privacy, for approaching you like a business problem instead of the extraordinary young woman who saved my son." Tyler took a careful sip, considering his words. "Dad, I understand why you were scared. After Mom died, I was scared too. But being scared together isn't the same as being safe together." "What do you mean?" Richard asked, though Kiana could see he already knew. "Safe together means trusting each other to make good choices, even when those choices involve other people." Tyler glanced at Kiana, like trusting me to recognize when someone is genuinely kind, and trusting him to handle friendship like any other teenager, Kiana added gently, even when that friendship crosses lines you've drawn on maps. Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I've forgotten how to trust anyone's judgment but my own." Then maybe, David said, chocolate mustache decorating his upper lip, "you could practice with small stuff first, like trusting Tyler to pick his own hot chocolate mug." The adults stared at him, then burst into laughter. Real laughter that seemed to surprise all of them. David beamed, pleased with his wisdom. "From the mouths of babes," Richard murmured. He looked at Tyler with something Kiana had never seen before, not just love, but respect. "What would you like to try first? What small trust?" Tyler considered this seriously. "I'd like to invite Kiana and David to dinner sometime. At our place, without background checks or security briefings or investigations. Just dinner," Kiana confirmed, "like normal people." "We're not exactly normal people," Richard said ruefully. "No," Tyler agreed. "But maybe we could be normal friends." The word hung in the air again. Friends. But this time it felt less fragile, more possible. "I'd like that," Richard said quietly, "though I should warn you, I haven't cooked for guests in, well, ever." "We could teach you," David offered generously. "Kiana's really good at grilled cheese." "I make excellent grilled cheese," Kiana confirmed with mock seriousness. "It's all about the butter distribution." As the rain continued outside, the four of them sat around the small table, sharing hot chocolate and the tentative beginning of something that looked remarkably like family. Not the family any of them had started with, but the family they were choosing to build. For the first time in years, Richard Blackstone felt like he might be getting something right. Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Tell us about a time when friendship surprised you by crossing boundaries you never thought possible. If this moment of connection touched you, tap that like button to spread the love. Subscribe if you're ready for more stories that prove kindness can change everything. 3 weeks later, Kiana stood in the marble lobby of Blackstone Tower, feeling like an imposter in her carefully chosen outfit, her one nice dress, borrowed heels from her mother's closet, and a confidence she didn't quite feel. Tonight was supposed to be the dinner Tyler had asked for, the next step in their unlikely friendship, but the text message on her phone had changed everything. Come up to the office first. Floor 47. We need to talk, whined Richard. The elevator seemed to climb forever, her reflection multiplying in the polished walls until she felt dizzy from her own image. When the doors opened, she found herself in a world of glass and steel that made her apartment building look like a dollhouse. Richard's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit, barely looked up from her desk. He's expecting you. Go right in. The corner office was exactly what Kiana had imagined, floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture that probably cost more than her mom's annual salary, and Richard behind a desk the size of her kitchen table. But something was wrong. His usually perfect composure was cracked, his silver hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Thank you for coming, he said, without looking up from the papers scattered before him. Please, sit. Kiana remained standing. Where's Tyler? He's expecting us for dinner. Tyler is at home. This conversation is between us. Richard finally raised his eyes, and what she saw there made her stomach drop. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. Disappointment mixed with what looked like resignation. Mr. Blackstone, what's this about? It's about this. He slid a manila folder across the desk toward her. Open it. With trembling fingers, Kiana opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance shots of her at the community center, at the diner where her mother worked, walking David to school. But it was the documents underneath that made her blood run cold. Financial records, bank statements, a detailed report of every transaction in the Washington family's life for the past month. And at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, a series of deposits that she'd never seen before. $500, $1,000, $800, all appearing in their account over the past 3 weeks. I don't understand, she whispered. Neither did I at first. Richard's voice was clinical, businesslike. These deposits started appearing right after our evening at your apartment. Money from an untraceable source going directly into your family's account. Kiana's hands shook as she turned the pages. This isn't... We didn't... I've seen this before, Miss Washington. People who get close to my family, who seem genuine and kind, only to reveal their true motives later. Richard stood, moving to the window. I let my guard down. Tyler convinced me to trust, and this is what happens. Mr. Blackstone, I swear to you, I have never seen these deposits before. We don't have this kind of money. Of course you haven't seen them. That's how sophisticated cons work. Someone else makes the deposits, creates the paper trail, and when it's discovered, you can claim innocence. His reflection in the glass looked tired, defeated. The question is, who's behind this? Who's using you to get to my son? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Kiana sank into the chair, staring at the impossible numbers on the bank statements. Her mind raced through possibilities, explanations, but none of it made sense. You think I'm running some kind of scam. I think you're a pawn in someone else's game. The question is whether you know it or not. Richard turned to face her. These deposits coincide exactly with your friendship with Tyler. That's not a coincidence. Because friendship with Tyler is so unbelievable that it has to be fake. The words came out sharper than she intended. Years of facing assumptions about her motivations finally boiling over. Richard's jaw tightened. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Poor scholarship girl gets close to rich boy. Must be after money, because people like me can't possibly care about people like him for real reasons. Kiana stood, her borrowed heels clicking against the marble floor. "You know what? You were right to investigate everyone, but you investigated the wrong things. Miss Washington, you want to know what I think happened? I think someone else figured out that Tyler was finally making a friend, and they decided to destroy it. Because, God forbid, your son actually connect with someone who isn't on your approved list." She threw the folder back onto his desk, papers scattering. "And you're helping them do it." "I'm protecting my son." "You're protecting yourself." The words echoed in the vast office. "You're so terrified of being hurt again that you'd rather believe the worst about the first person to genuinely care about Tyler than risk trusting someone." Richard's face went white. "That's enough." "No, it's not enough." Tears she'd been holding back began to fall. "Do you know what Tyler said to me yesterday? He said he finally understood what his mother meant about living instead of just existing. He said for the first time in his life he felt like a normal teenager." Kiana. "And you want to take that away from him because some numbers on a bank statement are more believable than the possibility that someone could love your son without wanting anything in return." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below them. Millions of lights representing millions of lives that suddenly felt more real than this sterile confrontation. "Tyler's waiting for us," Kiana said quietly. "He made dinner himself, spent 3 hours on it. He wanted tonight to be perfect because he's never had friends over before." Richard's composure finally cracked completely. I won't let him be hurt again." "Then stop hurting him yourself." Kiana moved toward the door. "When you figure out who's really behind this, you know where to find me. But I won't be part of destroying the best thing that's ever happened to your son." As the elevator doors closed behind her, Kiana caught a glimpse of Richard slumped over his desk, surrounded by the evidence of a friendship he was too afraid to trust. 47 floors below, Tyler was still waiting for a dinner that would never happen. Tyler paced his bedroom like a caged animal, his phone clutched in his trembling hand. 3 unanswered calls to Kiana, 5 texts. The elaborate dinner he'd spent all afternoon preparing sat untouched on the dining room table. Homemade pasta, garlic bread, even a chocolate cake that had taken him 4 tries to get right. Something was wrong. Kiana wouldn't just not show up. She wouldn't ignore him completely. Not after everything they'd shared. The penthouse felt larger than usual, every shadow seeming to mock his naive belief that friendship could be simple, that someone like Kiana could see past the money and complications to find something worth caring about in him. His father had been in his office all evening, claiming urgent business. But Tyler knew the difference between Richard's work voice and his trouble voice. Something had happened, and it involved Kiana. It had to. Tyler's hands shook as he scrolled through his contacts, past the empty list that had defined his social life until 3 weeks ago. Then he did something he'd never done before. He called someone who wasn't family or staff. David answered on the second ring. "Tyler, is everything okay?" "David, is Kiana there? She was supposed to come to dinner. She came home crying." David's 8-year-old voice was matter-of-fact but concerned. "She locked herself in her room and won't talk to anyone. Mom's really worried." Tyler's stomach dropped. Crying? Why was she crying? "I don't know. She just said something about your dad not trusting her. And then she started crying harder." David paused. "Did your dad do something mean to Kiana?" The question hit Tyler like a physical blow. His father had done something. Of course he had. Because Richard Blackstone couldn't let anything good exist without examining it for weaknesses, without finding reasons why it couldn't last. "David, I need to talk to her. Can you tell her I'm coming over?" "Tyler, no." David's voice turned serious in a way that reminded Tyler exactly how much this little boy had already learned about protecting his family. "She said she can't see you anymore. She said it's too complicated." Tyler ended the call and stared at his reflection in the darkened window. For 15 years, he'd accepted his father's protection, trusted that isolation was safety. But standing in their empty penthouse, surrounded by the remnants of a friendship his father had apparently destroyed, Tyler realized that safety without connection wasn't life. It was just an expensive form of death. He found Richard in his study, surrounded by financial documents, and wearing the same haunted expression he'd carried since Elena's funeral. "What did you do to her?" Richard looked up, startled by the steel in Tyler's usually soft voice. "Tyler, I can explain. What did you do?" "Someone's been depositing money into her family's account. Large amounts. Large amounts. I had to confront her about it." Richard's voice was tired, defensive. "I had to protect you." Tyler felt something cold settle in his chest. "And what did she say when you accused her?" "She denied it, of course. But Tyler, the evidence." "The evidence of what? That someone gave her family money. Did you ever consider that maybe someone else figured out she was important to me and wanted to destroy it?" Richard's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean that for 3 weeks, I've been happier than I've been since Mom died. And suddenly, mysteriously, there's evidence that makes Kiana look like a con artist." Tyler's voice rose. "Did you investigate where the money came from, or did you just assume the worst?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "You didn't investigate," Tyler continued, his voice breaking. "You saw what looked like proof that she was using me, and you were relieved, because it meant you didn't have to risk trusting anyone." "Tyler." "No, Dad. I'm done." Tyler turned toward the door. "I'm going to her apartment." "You can't. It's not safe." "Safe." Tyler spun around, years of quiet compliance finally exploding into fury. "You want to talk about safe? I haven't been safe since the day Mom died, because you turned our life into a prison. I haven't had a real conversation with anyone my age until Kiana. I haven't laughed without worrying about your approval until 3 weeks ago." Richard stood slowly, his composure completely shattered. "I lost your mother. I can't lose you too. You're not going to lose me by letting me live, but you will lose me by keeping me locked away." Tyler's voice gentled, seeing the genuine pain in his father's eyes. "Dad, I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but Kiana isn't Mom's accident waiting to happen. She's just a girl who was kind to someone when she didn't have to be." The money could have come from anyone. Derek Morrison's family. Someone who wanted to discredit her. Hell, it could be someone targeting you who saw an opportunity to hurt both of us. Tyler pulled out his phone. "But I know Kiana, and I know she would never use me." "How can you be so sure?" Tyler smiled sadly. "Because she's the first person who ever made me feel normal instead of fragile. Why would she destroy that?" Richard sank into his chair, looking older than his 42 years. "What if I'm wrong about her?" "Then you apologize and try to make it right." "And if I'm right?" Tyler met his father's eyes steadily. "Then I learned something important about trusting people. But Dad, I'd rather risk being hurt than guarantee I'll be alone." The words hung in the air between them. A choice that would define not just Tyler's future, but the kind of man Richard wanted to be. Outside, the city hummed with millions of people taking chances on each other every day, building connections despite the risk of loss. "The investigative team that handles our security," Richard said quietly. "They could trace those deposits. Find out where they really came from. Will you ask them to?" Richard looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not the fragile child he'd been protecting, but the young man Tyler was becoming. Someone who understood that love required courage. "Yes," he whispered. "And Tyler, if I'm wrong about her, we'll figure out how to make it right. Together." For the first time in 7 years, Richard Blackstone chose trust over fear. When have you had to choose between protecting someone you love and letting them take a risk that could help them grow? Share your story below. Sometimes the bravest love is the kind that lets go. The call came at 6:47 a.m., jolting Richard from the first restful sleep he'd had in days. His head of security's voice was grim but unsurprised. "We found the source of the deposits, Mr. Blackstone. You're not going to like it." An hour later, Richard stood outside Derek Morrison's family estate, flanked by his security team, and carrying a folder that would change everything. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent so much energy investigating the innocent that he'd missed the guilty hiding in plain sight. Derek's father, Thomas Morrison, answered the door in his bathrobe. his bloodshot eyes immediately focusing on the folder in Richard's hands. "We need to talk," Richard said quietly. The conversation that followed was brief and devastating. The gambling debts Richard's investigation had uncovered were worse than reported. Thomas Morrison owed dangerous people dangerous amounts of money. When he'd learned that his son had been humiliated by a scholarship student defending Tyler Blackstone, he'd seen an opportunity. "I thought if I could discredit the girl, maybe create some scandal around your family." Thomas's voice trailed off, the full weight of his desperation finally hitting him. "I never meant for it to go this far. You tried to destroy a 15-year-old girl's reputation to cover your gambling debts. I was going to stop the deposits, make it look like a banking error." Thomas's hands shook as he spoke. "I just needed time to figure out another solution." Richard stared at this man who had been willing to sacrifice a child's future for his own mistakes and felt a familiar rage, the same fury that had consumed him after Elena's death. But underneath the anger was something else: recognition. Thomas Morrison was a man so afraid of losing what mattered to him that he'd lost sight of what was right, just like Richard had done the night before. By the time Richard reached the Washington family's apartment building, the morning sun was painting the modest neighborhood in shades of gold that his penthouse had never quite captured. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs instead of waiting for the ancient elevator, each step feeling like a small act of penance. Linda Washington answered the door, her work uniform suggesting she was between shifts at the hospital. Her expression when she saw him was polite but wary, a mother protecting her cubs. "Mr. Blackstone, this is unexpected. Mrs. Washington, I owe your daughter an apology, a significant one." He held up the folder containing the real investigation results. "May I come in?" Kiana emerged from the hallway, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. She'd clearly been crying, but her chin was raised in the same stubborn angle Tyler had described with admiration. "Kiana," Richard's voice caught. "I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong." He explained about the deposits, about Derek's father, about how his own fear had blinded him to the truth that was right in front of him. As he spoke, he watched Kiana's expression shift from hurt to disbelief, to something that might have been forgiveness. "You really thought I was running a con on Tyler?" she asked when he finished. "I thought someone was, and I was so afraid of my son being hurt that I chose suspicion over trust." Richard set the folder on their small table. "I've spent 7 years trying to protect Tyler from the world, but I forgot that sometimes the world has beautiful things to offer." Linda Washington had been listening from the kitchen doorway, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Blackstone, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What changed your mind? Was it just the investigation results or something else?" Richard thought about Tyler's words the night before, about choosing risk over guaranteed loneliness. "My son reminded me that love requires courage, and that protecting someone from all pain also protects them from all joy." Kiana stood slowly, studying Richard's face. "Where is Tyler now?" "Probably wondering if he's lost his first real friend, because his father is an idiot." A small smile tugged at the corner of Kiana's mouth. "His first friend? His first friend. You gave him something I couldn't buy, couldn't manufacture, couldn't control. You gave him belonging. And you almost took it away." "Yes, I did." Richard met her eyes steadily. "The question is, are you willing to give an old fool a second chance to get this right?" Before Kiana could answer, the apartment door burst open and Tyler rushed in, breathless from running up 3 flights of stairs. "Kiana, I'm sorry. My dad is an idiot, but I found out about the money and..." He stopped short, seeing his father standing in their living room. "Dad?" "Hello, Tyler. I came to apologize to Kiana for being exactly the kind of idiot you said I was." Tyler looked between them, hope and wariness warring in his expression. "Did you figure out who really deposited the money?" "Derek Morrison's father. He was trying to discredit Kiana to create problems for our family." Richard's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "I should have trusted your judgment about her character instead of letting fear make decisions for me." Tyler crossed the room to stand beside Kiana, a gesture of solidarity that made Richard's chest tighten with pride and regret. "So what happens now?" Kiana asked quietly. "Now," Richard said, "if you're willing, we try again. All of us. Tyler's homeschooling starts Monday, but maybe it doesn't have to be as solitary as I planned. Maybe learning happens better with friends." "What are you saying?" Tyler asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'm saying maybe Kiana would consider being your study partner. Officially, with proper compensation for her time and full transparency about everything." Richard looked at Linda Washington. "If her mother approves, of course." Linda stepped forward, studying Richard with the keen eye of someone who'd learned to read people's true intentions. "My daughter has never asked for anything but fairness, Mr. Blackstone. If you can offer her that real fairness, not charity, then we can talk." "Not charity," Richard said firmly. "Partnership, friendship, family, if we're lucky enough to earn it." Kiana looked at Tyler, seeing the hope in his gray eyes, the same hope she felt building in her own chest despite everything that had happened. "There's still the matter of Derek and his friends," she said practically. "Derek will be transferring schools," Richard said, "and his father will be making restitution for what he tried to do to your family." Tyler stepped closer to Kiana, his voice soft but certain. "I know my dad messed up. I know trust isn't easy after something like this. But Kiana, you're the best thing that's happened to me since my mom died. If you'll let us try again, I promise we'll get it right this time." Kiana looked around the small apartment at her mother's supportive smile, at David peeking around the corner with curious eyes, at Richard's genuinely remorseful expression, and at Tyler, whose friendship had already taught her that love could cross any divide if people were brave enough to build bridges. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's try again." Tyler's smile could have powered the city. 6 months later, Richard stood in the same spot by his office windows, but everything had changed. Below him, the city looked different, not like a circuit board, but like a community. And beside him, Tyler and Kiana worked on calculus problems, while David built elaborate block structures, their voices filling the penthouse with the kind of warmth money had never been able to buy. He'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in billions, but in the number of people who chose to love you despite your flaws. And by that measure, Richard Blackstone had finally become a very rich man indeed. "Hey Dad," Tyler called from the dining table. "Kiana's mom gets off work at 10. Want to pick her up and bring her home for late dinner?" "Home," Richard smiled, realizing that for the first time since Elena's death, that word meant exactly what it should. The place where the people you love want to be. "I'd like that very much." Outside, the city sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing someone taking a chance on love. And in the penthouse that had once been a beautiful prison, 4 people who'd found each other across impossible odds continued writing their story, one built on trust, second chances, and the revolutionary idea that family isn't just what you're born into, but what you choose to build. Sometimes the greatest wealth comes disguised as the most unexpected friendships. What unlikely connection has changed your life? Share your story below. We'd love to hear about the relationships that surprised you with their power to heal.
If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what happens next. Tomorrow's story will restore your faith in humanity in ways you never expected. Click the video showing on your screen right now. Trust me, you need this one in your life. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Beautiful souls.